standing by on the phone is our legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, our good friend Joe DiGenova. Hello, Joe.
Good morning.
I want to start off by talking about Benghazi, because we've seen these reports come out in the last few days. The Senate Intelligence Committee report was, I think, very damning to the State Department. It was not supposed to be a partisan report, but the Republicans did add a thing to the end of the thing. The report basically said State Department should have seen this coming. There were mistakes made, and this was preventable. And then the Republicans came in and added an addendum. And by the way, the State Department was run by Hillary Rodham Clinton. That seems to be the take that we got from them. As you look at these reports and all of the additional reporting that has been done of late on Benghazi, what do you see?
Well, I think the absence from the majority, the Democrats' report, even mentioning Hillary Clinton is a disgrace. It's very much like the Accountability Review Board, as you know, which did an after-action assessment for the department with Pickering. They never even interviewed Hillary Clinton, barely mentioned her name in the report. This is standard operating procedures for the majority Democrats in the Senate. They were extremely critical of the Department of State, but weren't critical of Hillary Clinton. I mean, how ludicrous is that? Can you imagine if that had been a Republican administration and they were writing the report? But what's really bad about the Senate report is that they claim in there that Ambassador Stevens turned down increases in security from General Ham. That is not true. What happened was he was instructed by the State Department not to agree to the increase in security. He was told that the decision had already been made and that he could not ask for increased security. So the New York Times faulted Ambassador Stevens yesterday in their lead editorial, a disgraceful bit of editorial writing by the New York Times.
In other words,
they're just crazy up there.
So when Ham called the ambassador Stevens and said, "Would you like some more security?" He'd already been told by his superiors at the State Department, "He's going to call and ask you, but you're not to accept it."
That is exactly right. He had repeatedly requested increased security, and then of course he wanted more security, and of course Leon Panetta signed an order reducing security without waiting for an opportunity to the process to proceed. And Panetta really, over the long haul of history, will be seen to have acted really, really poorly throughout this entire affair, especially the night of the assault. He did not stand up for what had been done.
Joe DiGenova, another person who's going to be viewed as acting poorly that night is Hillary Clinton, and certainly in the days preceding this attack in terms of the security at the embassies being her responsibility ultimately as Secretary of State. Listen to this exchange. This was over the weekend on Sunday. Washington Post and Nia Malika Henderson asked about Hillary Clinton's biggest accomplishment as Secretary of State. Listen to this.
Does she have a sort of counter-narrative about, what's her biggest accomplishment as Secretary of State? Right. We don't really know that, and at this point, Benghazi is standing in for her term as Secretary of State.
Is she being defined by Benghazi at this point successfully?
I think it's beginning to happen, and the reason is she is leaving a vacuum. Hillary Clinton has decided to do a rope-a-dope, which is what she's done. You can count on one hand the number of interviews she's done over the last 15, 20 years. She stays away from the press. That there's the good and bad of that. She's decided that she doesn't want to take any questions on Benghazi, and the reason is she knows that after that performance before the Senate committee where she can say, what difference at this point does it make, that she cannot withstand what is coming factually on this. Number two, there is no timeline for her behavior that night, the night of the attack, nor is there one for the President of the United States. That is a purposeful decision by both of them not to put on the record what they did not do that night. So as far as I think Benghazi is developing for her as a very serious problem.
Joe DiGenova, we're going to talk, as you may have heard me say, Eli Lake is going to be here at the bottom of the hour. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty on these NSA reforms. But there's one aspect that really stuck out to me that I want you to comment on. That's the politics of this. You know, you've been in this town a long time, and you know a lot of the players. Were you surprised to hear that this independent council that will review how the NSA is operating and review it on behalf of the people's rights is going to be headed by John Podesta? John Podesta, Joe DiGenova?
Well, I think that what we're seeing here is the complete politicization of the process of intelligence. This started with the prior CIA director. It continues with Brennan, and now the notion that John Podesta is going to be responsible or leading a group that's going to stand up for the privacy rights as individuals.
He's an activist political operator in this town. I mean, he's a hatchet man.
Yeah, I think by and large this is going to be viewed as silly by most serious observers. But let's remember what the president didn't do. This was President Obama acting the way he did when he was in the Illinois State Senate, where he voted present hundreds of times. He voted present on the NSA collection program the other day. He did basically nothing. And what's interesting is he did not stop the bulk collection of metadata, phone, emails, etc., from American citizens and obviously from people overseas.
It was window dressing.
What was done was basically a punt. He did absolutely nothing. He gave a speech. He mouthed nostrums about privacy and about protecting the country, and we all have to work together. But he did, in essence, nothing other than the requirement, which he wants now, for NSA to seek an order from the FISA court before it can actually look at phone records and observe them from its collection. He did nothing. I mean, ending tapping the phone records of foreign leaders, phone calls of foreign leaders. Guess what? We're going to do that anyway, because if Merkel's talking to Putin, we'll be listening.
Let me ask you about pot, because in the District of Columbia, they're talking about decriminalizing it. In the state of Maryland, in which you reside, they're talking about legalizing it. And, you know, I'm sort of on one view and Larry has another. Where do you come down on that as a former, you know, U.S. attorney?
Well, here's the thing about legalization. Just remember this. They say that you have to be 21 or older under the Maryland proposal. That's not going to stop these people or even drug dealers from selling stronger strains of marijuana, which, of course, is now the standard. Marijuana 20 years ago, it wasn't like the marijuana of today. The marijuana of today is much more powerful, much more dangerous. The problem is for younger people. It is absolutely established medically that the intake of marijuana by young developing people who are developing in their brains is very, very dangerous. It has a deleterious effect on the development of their brains, on memory, and on active lifestyles. As far as adults are concerned, I have no problem with adults having marijuana. But the problem with this is they're not going to be able to control this. It is going to get in the hands of youngsters. It's the nature of drugs. And, you know, people have to remember, after the Civil War, when morphine was developed, you could go into any drugstore in the United States and buy heroin, opiates, and morphine over the counter without a prescription. It got so bad in this country that we had the largest addict population percentage-wise in the history of our country, and it led to the passage in 1914 of the Harrison Narcotic Act. So we're going down a road. I would wait to see what the experiment is like in Washington and Colorado before I change the law. But remember, Maryland is the California of the East, along with New York. And you know, it's a Democratic state. The Democrats run the state. They're running it into the ground. Why not make pot available for everybody and just sort of put a nice exclamation point on the destruction of the state?
And not only that, because they've run out of any other thing to tax. So,
oh, my God. I mean, these people in Maryland, I mean, as if this is the most pressing issue, right? Businesses are leaving the state, and these guys want to legalize marijuana. Good
all right.
God.
Joe, we'll have to leave it right there. Always a pleasure, Joe.
Okay, guys.